The church was shaking. People were screaming, running, falling over chairs. Mama See It All stood at the altar, her eyes glowing white, her voice breaking into a hiss that wasn't human. As the congregation watched in horror, her arm rippled, then cracked, scales pushing through the skin. Elizabeth raised her phone with trembling hands. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the evidence." But Mama turned slowly toward her, smiling, a smile that did not belong to any human being. "You think you can expose me?" the creature whispered. "Even your God cannot save you now." 3 months earlier. The sky wept that Sunday morning. Rain drummed against the corrugated roof of Holy Ground Ministries. Thunder rolling across Lagos like a warning. Despite the storm, 3,000 souls packed the hall shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with rain-soaked clothes, expensive perfumes, and desperation. Women in their finest lace fanned themselves. Men in Agbada robes clutched Bibles with white knuckles. Children squirmed, sensing something wrong. The worship team had been playing for 40 minutes, drums pounding, guitars wailing. The lead singer screamed, "He's coming, prepare the way." At the back, Elizabeth Okonkwo watched with eyes that had learned to see beyond surfaces. 28 years old, mass communication graduate. She'd been attending Holy Ground Ministries for 7 months. 7 months of watching, questioning, slowly understanding that something was terribly wrong. She hadn't always been this way. Elizabeth had come as a true believer after her brother fell ill with a mysterious sickness hospitals couldn't cure. Someone told her about Prophetess Patricia, about Mama See It All, the woman who could see into your soul, so Elizabeth had come. What she'd seen had changed her, just not the way anyone intended. Whispers rippled through the congregation. "She's coming. Mama is coming. I can feel the anointing already." The lights dimmed. The worship team reached crescendo, then went silent. For a moment, only rain and 3,000 people breathing as one. Then she appeared. Prophetess Patricia emerged from behind the purple curtain. Nearly 6 feet tall, she glided rather than walked. Her white and gold robes flowed like water. Her dark skin absorbed light. Her impossibly large eyes seemed to see everything at once. The congregation erupted. People screamed, wept, rushed forward, desperate to touch her garment. Ushers in purple suits struggled to maintain order. "Mama! Prophetess! See me, Mama!" Patricia kept her eyes forward, face set in divine detachment. When she reached the altar, she raised one hand. Silence fell like a hammer. "Children of the Most High," her voice boomed through speakers. "I greet you in the mighty name of our Lord and Savior." "Amen," the congregation roared. "Do you know what the Lord told me this morning?" She paused. He said, "Patricia, there are people in that hall today carrying burdens too heavy for them, people whose enemies have been working overtime, but today is their day of deliverance." The congregation went wild. Patricia closed her eyes and swayed. Head tilted back. The candles flickered despite no wind. The temperature dropped. Then came the scream, "Ah! Jesus! Blood of Jesus!" A woman in red stood trembling. From the front row, Agatha rushed forward. Patricia's aide with sharp features and eyes that never blinked. "Mama!" Agatha's voice shook with excitement. "She did it again. God has used Mama to heal a cripple." The congregation gasped. Elizabeth's heart sank. From the VIP section, a man rose from his wheelchair. He stood slowly, shakily, but unmistakably. Perhaps 50, with grey temples and a soft body that spoke of years sitting. "I can walk," he shouted, voice cracking. "Mama, I can walk. I've been in that wheelchair for 5 years, and now, oh God, I can walk." The hall erupted. People rushed forward. The worship team launched into celebration. Patricia remained serene, one hand raised to heaven. But Elizabeth wasn't celebrating, because Elizabeth had seen that man before. Last Thursday, at Balogun Market, walking, carrying heavy bags of fabric, navigating the crowded market with ease. She wanted to scream, to tell everyone. But she looked around, the widow giving her pension to seeds and oils, the young man who'd dropped out of university to serve here, mothers holding sick children. all believing, all hoping. The ushers watched with sharp eyes for dissent. Elizabeth had seen what happened to doubters. Called out publicly, accused of witchcraft, physically removed. So Elizabeth sat down. She forced a smile. She clapped when everyone clapped. But inside, a fire ignited. Inside, a decision crystallized. She would expose Prophetess Patricia. She would reveal Mama See It All for what she truly was. As the service continued, as Patricia prophesied with impossible accuracy, as offering baskets circulated 3 times, Elizabeth pulled out her phone and began taking notes. The investigation had begun. 3 days earlier, Thursday afternoon, Elizabeth had been at Balogun Market hunting for Ankara fabric for her mother's birthday. The narrow corridors were packed, air thick with ground pepper, perfume and leather. Traders called out their wares in hoarse voices. She'd been moving from shop to shop when she collided with someone. Sorry, the man said, stepping back. He was large, perhaps 50, with a round face. But what caught Elizabeth's attention was what he carried. 2 massive bags filled with fabric, so heavy the handles cut red marks into his palms. Yet he carried them easily, navigating the crowd with surprising agility. No problem, Elizabeth replied, stepping aside. She'd thought nothing of it then. Just another market encounter in Lagos where thousands of people crossed paths daily. But now, watching that same man miraculously stand from his wheelchair, Elizabeth understood. The miracle wasn't divine, it was theatre. After the service ended, Elizabeth stood outside watching the crowd disperse into the rain. Her cousin Ngozi approached, umbrella in hand. "You look troubled," Ngozi said. She was a nurse at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, practical and grounded in ways Elizabeth appreciated. "I saw something," Elizabeth said carefully. They began walking toward the bus stop. "What kind of something?" "That man who was healed today. I saw him Thursday at Balogun Market, walking normally, carrying heavy bags." Ngozi was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure it was him?" "Positive. Same face, same build. I literally collided with him." "Then why would he That's what I need to find out." Ngozi grabbed Elizabeth's arm, pulling her to a stop. "Be careful. These people don't play. I've heard stories about people who questioned these big churches. One journalist had to flee the country after investigating a similar situation. They destroyed his career, threatened his family. I know it's dangerous." "Do you?" Ngozi's eyes were intense. "Elizabeth, these aren't just con artists. If what you're suggesting is true, they're criminals running a sophisticated operation. They have money, influence, connections. They can make your life very difficult." Elizabeth thought about her brother still sick at home, about the thousands of desperate people giving their last naira to this church, about the widow and the university dropout and all the others trapped in this web. "I have to try," she said finally. Ngozi sighed. "Then at least be smart about it. Don't confront anyone directly. Don't let them know you're investigating. Document everything quietly. And for God's sake, don't do this alone." They parted ways at the bus stop. As Elizabeth rode home through the rain-slicked streets, she opened a new folder on her phone and titled it Project Exposure. The first entry was simple. Fake cripple miracle. Man seen walking at Balogun Market 3 days before healing. Need photo evidence. She had no idea how deep this investigation would take her. She didn't know about the ministers' summit, the Marine Kingdom, the underwater convocations. She didn't know Patricia was literally transforming into something not quite human every Wednesday midnight. She only knew what she'd seen. And she knew it was wrong. That would have to be enough to start. Over the next 2 weeks, Elizabeth attended every service. She sat in different locations each time, back row, side aisle, balcony, observing patterns. She noticed the ushers. They weren't just maintaining order. They were watching, listening, taking mental notes. She saw them whisper to Agatha after services, pointing out specific individuals in the crowd. She noticed how Patricia's prophecies worked. Often they were vague enough to apply to many people. Someone here is struggling with finances. In an African church, that could be half the congregation, but the person who stood up first would claim it. and Patricia would elaborate with details that seemed impossibly specific. Elizabeth started researching cold reading techniques, psychological manipulation, the methods stage psychics used. She was shocked by how many matched Patricia's methods. But some things didn't fit the pattern. Some revelations were too specific, too accurate. Patricia would call out someone by name she'd never met, reveal secrets no cold reading could discover. Those moments troubled Elizabeth more than the obvious tricks. She began interviewing ex-members quietly, people who'd left Holy Ground Ministries disillusioned or broke. Their stories painted a disturbing picture. "They have a whole database," one woman told her over phone, refusing to meet in person. "Every consultation form you fill out, every prayer request you submit, it all goes into a system. Then, during services, Patricia has an earpiece. Her team feeds her information." "How do you know this?" "My sister worked in the office before she quit. She saw the files, hundreds of people, all their personal information catalogued, family problems, financial situations, health issues, everything." Elizabeth added it to a growing file, but she needed more than hearsay. She needed proof. That's when she decided to follow the money. Holy Ground Ministries was technically a registered non-profit, which meant their finances should be public record. Elizabeth spent 3 days at the Corporate Affairs Commission, digging through paperwork. The numbers were staggering. 12 million naira per month in offerings. Another 11.5 million in product sales, holy water, miracle oil, blessed cloths, prayer manuals. The revenue of a mid-sized company, all tax-exempt because it was a church. And where did the money go? Patricia's parsonage was a mansion in Lekki worth over 200 million naira. 3 cars registered to the ministry, a Range Rover, a Mercedes and a Bentley, all in Patricia's name. Foreign trips, luxury hotels, designer clothes. Meanwhile, the church's charitable giving was minimal. A few scholarships, some food distribution. Nothing proportional to the income. Elizabeth photographed everything. Bank statements, property records, vehicle registrations. She was building a case, brick by brick. But she still needed something undeniable. Something that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. Something that would wake people up to the truth. She just didn't know what that would be. Not yet. 3 weeks into her investigation, Elizabeth attended a Wednesday evening service. These were smaller, more intimate, maybe 500 people instead of thousands. Patricia claimed Wednesday services were for deeper spiritual work, for those seeking breakthrough. The service followed a familiar pattern until Patricia suddenly stopped mid-sermon. Her eyes glazed over, head tilted at an odd angle. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, deeper, layered with something that made Elizabeth's skin crawl. "There is someone here," Patricia said, "carrying a spirit of death. You've been targeted by marine powers. They want to cut your life short before you fulfill your destiny." A young man in the 3rd row stood, trembling. Elizabeth recognized him, Obiora, recently returned from studying in London. His mother attended regularly. "Come forward," Patricia commanded. Obiora approached the altar reluctantly, his mother pushing him from behind, face twisted with worry. Patricia placed her hand on his forehead. Obiora flinched at her touch. "Your life battery is running dangerously low," Patricia said, voice carrying throughout the hall. "The marine spirits have been draining you slowly. If nothing is done, you won't live to see 30. "What?" Obiora's mother gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "No! Jesus, no!" "Mama, this doesn't make sense," Obiora protested, his engineer's mind rebelling. "I just had a complete physical in London. I'm healthy." "Physical health is not spiritual health," Patricia cut him off sharply. "I see what the doctors can't see. Your spirit is dying, and when your spirit dies, your body follows. You have maybe 6 months unless you act now." "What do I need to do?" his mother cried, falling to her knees. "A sacrifice. A cow must be slaughtered. A life given so that life may be preserved. The monetary equivalent is 500,000 naira." Obiora's jaw dropped. 500,000? For what exactly? "Are you questioning God's prophet?" Patricia's voice took on an edge. The congregation murmured disapprovingly. "Your pride will be your death. Your mother sees the truth even if you're blind. We'll pay, Obiora's mother screamed. I will not lose my son. We'll find the money. Mama, please, Obiora started, but his mother was already pulling out her phone, hands shaking as she arranged a transfer. She was a nurse working in London, sending money home. This was probably her savings, years of work gone in minutes. Elizabeth watched, fury building. This was evil, weaponizing a mother's love to extract money. There was no life battery, no marine spirits targeting Obiora. It was psychological terrorism dressed as prophecy. She pulled out her phone and recorded the entire exchange, the transfer, the mother's tears, Obiora's helpless frustration. When it was done, Patricia blessed them both and moved on to the next prophetic word. Business as usual. But Elizabeth had seen enough. This wasn't just fraud. This was cruelty. And she would expose it if it was the last thing she did. After the service, Elizabeth approached Obiora outside. I'm sorry about what happened in there. He looked at her, anger and shame warring on his face. Who are you? Someone who's been investigating this church. What just happened to you? It's a scam. There's no life battery. I know that, he said bitterly. But tell that to my mother. She's convinced if I don't complete the sacrifice, I'll die. Now I'm trapped. If I refuse and something happens to me, anything, even an accident, she'll blame herself forever for not listening to the prophet. Patricia weaponized your mother's love against you. Exactly. He looked back at the church building. I want to expose her, but I don't know how without destroying my mother in the process. Elizabeth pulled out her phone. I'm building a case. If you're willing to testify about what happened tonight. I can't, not publicly. My mother would never forgive me. Then let me use your story anonymously. Help me gather evidence. Together, maybe we can bring this whole operation down. Obiora studied her for a long moment. You're serious about this? Completely. It's dangerous. These people have reach. I know. He nodded slowly. Okay, I'm in. What do you need? And just like that, Elizabeth's investigation gained an ally. Someone from inside the church's web. Someone with access to spaces she couldn't reach. Someone with his own reasons to want the truth exposed. The net was beginning to tighten around Prophetess Patricia. Though Patricia didn't know it yet, the hunter had become the hunted, and the evidence was mounting piece by damning piece. Before she was Mama See-It-All, she was Patience Nwosu, a girl from a God-fearing family in Nsukka. Patience grew up in a modest compound where her father was a deacon and her mother taught Sunday school. By 12, she was leading the children's choir, her voice bringing tears to the elders' eyes. That girl will do great things for God, they said. She's anointed. When she was 15, a visiting evangelist prophesied over her. I see you standing before multitudes. I see a ministry that will touch nations. But never seek power from other sources, or your fall will be great. Patience promised to serve God faithfully. After university, she moved to Lagos with dreams ablaze. She rented a tiny room in Ajagunla, found a small hall, printed flyers, started New Dawn Ministries. First Sunday, 3 people came, an elderly woman who thought it was a different church, a young man who left when he realized there was no free food, a street child who fell asleep during the sermon. Patience preached to empty chairs anyway. Weeks became months, months became years. Nothing worked. Meanwhile, other churches that started around the same time filled with crowds. Pastors drove past in nice cars while Patience walked because she couldn't afford bus fare. She borrowed money from parents, then friends, then loan sharks. She fell behind on rent, skipped meals, wore the same 2 outfits for months. Her health declined. Weight loss, persistent cough, skin gone dull. 3 years of failure, 3 years of empty chairs and unanswered prayers. One Thursday evening, Patience sat in her room, counting Sunday's offering. 350 naira. Not enough for a meal, much less rent. The eviction notice sat on the table. Her parents couldn't send more. Her father had just retired. Friends stopped answering calls. Loan sharks sent men with threats. Something inside her broke. God, she screamed at the ceiling, I've given you everything. For what? Poverty? Failure? She grabbed her Bible and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and fell, pages crumpling. That was the moment, the first crack in her foundation of faith. Maybe faithfulness isn't enough, a voice whispered. Maybe God helps those who help themselves. That night, she made a decision. She would attend one more conference, a big one where all the successful pastors gathered. She borrowed 50,000 naira from another loan shark at crushing interest. She had to understand their secret. The Ministers' Summit. The Grand Paradise Hotel in Victoria Island gleamed like a palace. The lobby alone was larger than Patience's entire compound. Floors polished like mirrors. Chandeliers worth more than everything she owned. The daytime sessions taught practical ministry skills. Patience took notes, hoping to find the missing key. But on the second night, after official activities ended, she noticed something strange. The most successful pastors, people whose churches filled stadiums, quietly left the lobby together. Curiosity overcame caution. Patience followed. They walked to a side wing. One produced a key card and opened a door. Conference room 13B, private event. Patience caught the door before it closed and slipped inside. The room was nothing like the bright conference spaces. This was dim, lit only by candles. Heavy curtains blocked the windows. The air smelled of incense. Not sweet church incense, but something darker, nauseating. About 30 people arranged themselves in a circle around a low table covered with black cloth. Upon it sat items that made Patience's skin crawl. A bowl of what looked like blood. Strange symbols drawn in ash. Objects she couldn't identify but knew weren't Christian. She should have run. Every instinct screamed to flee. But her feet remained frozen. A distinguished man stepped forward. Pastor Benjamin Adeleke, known as Pastor Benji, founder of one of West Africa's largest churches. Welcome to the Real Ministers' Summit. His voice was smooth as silk. Welcome to where we discuss truths that cannot be spoken in daylight. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the circle. Success in ministry requires more than faith. It requires power, real power. And that power comes not from waiting on a God who may or may not answer, but from forming the right alliances. More murmurs, nervous laughter. Now, Pastor Benji's eyes scanned the room. We have a new sister tonight, someone who has been faithful, whose ministry has failed while others prosper. Sister Patience Nwosu, come forward. Patience's blood turned to ice. How did he know her name? Come. His voice was gentle but commanding. We've been expecting you. Every eye turned to her. Patience found herself walking forward as if in a dream. Tell us, Sister Patience, Pastor Benji said. How long have you been struggling? 3 years, she heard herself say. 3 years of faithfulness, and what has it gotten you? Nothing, Patience whispered. Speak up. Nothing, her voice cracked. Debt, poverty, failure. While others succeed with manipulation, I'm about to be evicted. Exactly, Pastor Benji nodded, because you're playing by rules that no longer apply. The real power comes from other sources, the ancient ones. The ones who ruled before Christianity came to Africa, the ones who work through churches now instead of against them. He gestured to the altar. Every successful ministry here has made an arrangement. They stopped relying solely on God and started accepting help from other patrons. You're talking about demons, Patience said flatly. Such crude terms, Pastor Benji chuckled. Look around. Do you see demons? No, you see successful ministers who learn to thrive. He placed a cold hand on her shoulder. You have a choice. Leave and return to poverty and obscurity. Or join us. Receive real power. Finally fulfill that prophecy. What's the cost? There's always a cost for power, always a sacrifice. Patience looked around. She recognized so many faces, pastors she'd admired, ministers whose faith she'd tried to emulate. They were all here. What would I have to sacrifice? Pastor Benji's smile widened. Different people make different sacrifices. Some their marriages, some their children, and some... He looked directly at her. Their fertility. The words hit like a physical blow. You want me to give up having children? in exchange for bearing spiritual children. Thousands of followers who will call you mother, who will give you their devotion and resources. One kind of fruitfulness for another. Since childhood, Patience had dreamed of being a mother. She had imagined a house full of children, teaching them about God the way her mother had taught her. "I can't," she whispered. "Then you can't succeed," Pastor Benji said simply. "Walk away. But if you do, nothing will change." The room was silent. 30 pairs of eyes waited. Patience thought of her tiny room, the eviction notice, the 350 naira. She thought of the prophecy of touching nations. She thought of her parents' disappointment if she returned home a failure. And she thought of something darker. How much she wanted to prove everyone wrong. How much she wanted those who'd ignored her to see her thriving. Pride, the very thing the evangelist had warned about. "What do I have to do?" Patience heard herself ask. The ritual, the ceremony was horrifyingly easy. They made her drink something from the bowl. It tasted like copper and ash. They made her stand in the center while they chanted in languages she didn't recognize. They made her repeat words she didn't understand but felt in her bones were binding. And then she felt it. Multiple presences entering the room. Cold, old, hungry. One approached her, circling like a predator examining prey. Then, with a sensation like ice water poured directly into her soul, it entered her. Patience screamed, not from pain, but from the wrongness of having something other take residence inside her body. Behind her eyes, in depths where only she should exist. The presence settled in like a parasite finding its host. She felt it examining her memories, her thoughts, her dreams. She felt it begin to change her, rewiring something essential. When it was over, Patience collapsed, gasping. She felt different, wrong, powerful. Pastor Benji helped her up. "Welcome to real ministry, Sister Patricia." "Patricia? My name is Patience." "Was Patience," he corrected. "You're reborn now. Patricia suits you better." Patience waits. Patricia takes. He handed her a card with only a phone number. "Call once a month, report your progress, and when you're established, you'll be invited to the real gatherings. The midnight meetings, the underwater convocations." "Underwater?" Pastor Benji just smiled mysteriously. First transformation. 6 months later, Patricia received the call. It was time for her next step. She was ready for a real gathering. The gathering was at midnight at a secluded property on Lagos's outskirts. About 50 pastors and prophets gathered, all recognizable, all successful. "Welcome, Sister Patricia," Pastor Benji greeted warmly. 300 members in 6 months? Impressive. Tonight you'll meet the Marine Queen herself. Before Patricia could ask, he led the group to the back where land sloped to a river. The water was wide and dark, reflecting stars. The group assembled on the bank. Pastor Benji and senior members began chanting. The chanting grew louder until the air vibrated. The river began to glow. Patricia gasped. The water illuminated from below, pale greenish light growing brighter. The surface rippled, then churned. Then she broke the surface. The Marine Queen, enormous, 20 feet long, her lower body a massive serpent covered in scales that shimmered with bioluminescent light. Her upper body was humanoid, but not quite human. Proportions wrong, features too perfect and too alien. Skin pale as moonlight, hair long and black, moving as if underwater. Eyes completely black, reflecting nothing. Patricia wanted to run, but she was frozen, transfixed by the terrible beauty. The Marine Queen's gaze landed on Patricia. "Patricia." The voice was like water running over stones, like waves, like a tsunami. "What do you seek?" Patricia found her voice. "Power, success, to fulfill my ministry." "What will you give?" "I've already given my womb." The Marine Queen smiled, teeth slightly too sharp, slightly too many. "That was your entry fee. But to truly become great, you must give more. Your midnight hours. Once a week, you will come to the water. You will enter and come to our kingdom. There you will be transformed. You will become one of us. One of you. Half human, half serpent, able to walk in both worlds. Your congregation will grow to thousands, your wealth beyond measure. your influence to the highest levels, but you must become more than human. Patricia looked at the Marine Queen, at the power radiating from every scale. She looked at the other pastors. Several had an odd look in their eyes, something flickering between human and other. She thought about refusing, about running. But then she thought about the 300 people who now attended her church, about how good it felt to be respected, to be called Mama, about the prophecy and how close she was to fulfilling it. "I'm willing," she said. The Marine Queen's smile widened. "Then come. Enter the water." Patricia walked to the river's edge, legs shaking. The water looked cold and dark and final. She took a deep breath and stepped in. The moment water closed over her head, everything changed. The river that appeared 20 feet deep suddenly yawned open beneath her, revealing depths that shouldn't exist. Down she sank, pulled by living currents, and her body began to change. Her skin tingled, then burned. She watched scales emerge, small at first, but growing larger, spreading across her skin. Her legs felt strange, heavy. She looked down and saw them beginning to fuse, skin between them stretching and connecting. She tried to scream, but found she could breathe underwater now. The water tasted of salt and secrets. Down, down, down until she saw it. The underwater kingdom, a city beneath the waves built from coral and bone and something that glowed. Towers rose from the riverbed, connected by bridges of pearl and gold. Gardens of kelp swayed, and everywhere were beings like the Marine Queen, serpent people, half human and half other. They welcomed Patricia. They showed her what she had become. She looked at her reflection in polished coral and barely recognized herself. Her lower body was serpentine, covered in scales shimmering with dark colors. Her eyes had changed, still human-shaped, but with a glow behind them. Her features had sharpened, become more striking, beautiful and terrible at once. The Marine Queen appeared beside her. "Now you understand the pact. You will return here weekly. We will teach you how to harvest power from human devotion, how to bind people through spiritual manipulation, how to stage miracles. In return, you feed us. Offerings, souls, influence." Patricia nodded, unable to speak. When she finally emerged from the river hours later, her body had returned to human form. But she could feel the serpent still inside her, coiled around her spine, ready to emerge whenever she willed it. "Now you're truly one of us," Pastor Benji said. Patricia couldn't speak. She had crossed every line. She had transformed into something other than human. There was no going back. But as she drove home, watching the sun rise over Lagos, Patricia felt excitement. Pure excitement at what she could now become. Within a year, she moved into a warehouse holding 1,000. Within 2 years, she built Holy Ground Ministries. Within 3 years, she was one of the most famous religious figures in Nigeria. And every Wednesday midnight, she would slip into water and return to the underwater kingdom. Growing more powerful, more serpentine, more divorced from the girl she'd once been. The prophecy was being fulfilled. She was touching multitudes, but at what cost? Patricia didn't let herself think about that, because thinking about costs was for people who still had souls to lose. And Patricia wasn't sure she had one of those anymore. Present day, 3 years after Patricia's initiation, Sunday morning at Holy Ground Ministries was a production. By 7 a.m., hours before the first service, the compound buzzed with activity. And in a windowless office off-limits to regular members, Patricia's core team held their weekly strategy meeting. Present were Agatha, who'd been with Patricia since early days; Felix, a former actor now miracle coordinator; Linda, a psychology graduate managing the prophecy database; and brother Jude, the burly head of security. Patricia sat at the head of the table, face bare of makeup, hair wrapped in a scarf. This was the real Patricia, not the glowing prophetess the congregation would see, but the calculating businesswoman running Holy Ground Ministries like a corporate enterprise. "Let's review," Patricia said. "Attendance? 5,200 across 3 services," Agatha replied, up 3%. "Offerings? 12 million naira total." Patricia frowned. "That's down from last month. Why?" Linda spoke up hesitantly. The economy is difficult, Mama. People are losing jobs. Then we push harder, Patricia said flatly. When times are difficult, people need hope more. And hope costs money. Yes, Mama. Felix, report on last Sunday's miracles. Felix smiled proudly. The blind man went perfectly, hit all his marks. We collected an extra 2 million from the spontaneous offering. Good. And the cripple I healed 2 weeks ago? No problems, Mama. Staying quiet, spending his payment wisely. He's even talking about coming back next year. Different condition, different service, so no one will recognize him. Patricia nodded with satisfaction. That's long-term thinking. Make sure he understands the consequences if he talks. Already done. Brother Jude had a conversation with him. Brother Jude grunted acknowledgement. His massive hands were folded on the table. Rumors said those hands had broken bones of people who tried to expose the church. New miracles for this week? Patricia asked. Felix pulled out his phone. 3 actors lined up. A woman with a tumor that will disappear. Will use a prosthetic that detaches easily. A man with a demon who will manifest then be cast out. And a young girl who will start speaking after years of being mute. The girl sounds risky. What if someone knows her? She's new to Lagos, Mama. Just moved from Calabar. Nobody knows her. I've coached her extensively. What's her payment? 200,000 naira and help settling in Lagos. Make it happen. But Felix, I want bigger miracles. More dramatic. Something that will go viral on social media. Felix leaned forward. I've been working on something. A man in a wheelchair who's also supposedly deaf and can't speak. Multiple disabilities. When you pray, he walks, hears, and talks for the first time in years. Triple miracle, Mama. The videos will spread like wildfire. Patricia's slow smile spread. I like it, but it has to be flawless. I'll handle it personally. Good. Linda, how's our database? Linda pulled up files on her laptop. 843 detailed profiles. About 17% of active congregation. Each includes personal information, family situations, financial status, secrets, weaknesses. Patricia nodded. This database allowed her to deliver prophecies that seemed divinely inspired, but were based on careful intelligence gathering. How are we collecting information? Multiple sources, Linda clicked through screens. Consultation forms members fill out. WhatsApp prayer groups that Agatha monitors, ushers and cell group leaders who report back, and… She looked uncomfortable. The mirror program. Ah yes, the mirrors. Patricia's most insidious invention. 2 years ago, Patricia had introduced the Mirror of Life program. Every member was encouraged to purchase a special mirror, really just cheap glass from China with a gold-painted frame, for 5,000 naira. Every morning, Patricia had instructed, stand before your mirror of life, speak your fears, your dreams, your secrets. The mirror will carry your words to the heavenly realm, and God will answer. What she didn't tell them, through Marine Kingdom rituals, Patricia had bound each mirror to herself spiritually. When members spoke to their mirrors, Patricia could tap into those conversations. She would see flashes, hear snippets, gain insights into their private lives. It was exhausting work, requiring hours in meditation, but worth it for the look on someone's face when she told them something no one else could possibly know. The mirror program is our most valuable asset, Patricia said. But we need to be careful. If anyone figures out what those mirrors really do… They won't, Mama, Linda assured. We've positioned it as completely spiritual, and members who benefit from your prophecies become our most loyal defenders. Still, I want security tightened. No one outside this room knows how it really works. Yes, Mama. They discussed product lines next. Holy water, 4,000 bottles sold last month at 1,000 naira each. Miracle oil, 1,500 bottles at 5,000 each. Combined revenue, 11.5 million naira per month from bottles of tap water and vegetable oil. We need new products, Patricia said. Blessed pens for students. Parents will pay anything they think will help their children succeed. As the meeting ended, Agatha lingered. Mama, there's something. That woman, Elizabeth. She's been asking questions about the miracles. the finances. I think she's investigating. Patricia's eyes sharpened. I know. Let her investigate. When the time is right, we'll destroy her so thoroughly she'll wish she'd never set foot in this church. Meanwhile, Elizabeth sat in the back row during that Sunday's service, taking notes hidden inside her Bible. For 3 weeks now, she'd been conducting systematic investigation. She'd interviewed ex-members. She'd cross-referenced Patricia's prophecies with public information and found many were just facts from social media. Most damning, she'd gotten a conversation with one of Felix's actors at a bar in Ikea. The man, drowning in guilt and alcohol, had confessed everything. "It's all fake, sister," he'd slurred. "She pays us to pretend. I was the man with the withered hand last year. My hand was fine, I just kept it curled. Why do you do it? Money, 20, 30, sometimes 50,000 for one Sunday's work. Just follow the script, hit your marks, sell the miracle." Elizabeth had recorded it all. Now, watching the service unfold, she saw the machinery behind the magic. The staged miracles, the researched prophecies, the psychological manipulation. But she needed more. She needed something undeniable. But that week, strange things started happening to Elizabeth. She woke at 3 a.m. to find her bedroom door wide open. She always closed it, always, but now it stood open, and she heard whispers from the hallway darkness. The next morning, all her browser tabs were closed. Every article she'd bookmarked, every document she'd been analyzing, gone. Then she found a page torn from her notebook. The page where she'd been compiling a timeline of Patricia's rise, connecting dates and events. Torn cleanly out. "Someone's trying to scare you," her cousin Ngozi said. "If it's Patricia's people, you need to stop." But Elizabeth couldn't stop. The harassment proved she was onto something. At 2 a.m. one night, she heard footsteps in her sitting room. She grabbed her phone, threw open her door. The room was empty, but the papers on her coffee table, carefully organized evidence, were scattered across the floor as if thrown by violent wind. Yet the windows were closed. The door was locked. "This is psychological warfare," Ngozi said as they cleaned up. Or Or Patricia really does have supernatural power," Elizabeth finished, "and she's using it against me." That's when Elizabeth decided she needed more than testimony and financial records. She needed something spectacular, something undeniable. She reached out to Samuel, an ex-usher who'd left the church disillusioned. "Samuel, I need information about Patricia's habits. When does she leave the compound? Where does she go?" Samuel looked uncomfortable. "Sister Elizabeth, what you're asking, that's dangerous. Please." He was quiet, stirring his coffee. Then, "There was one thing. A few times when I worked late, I saw her car leaving, always Wednesdays, around midnight." "Midnight where?" "I don't know. I asked another usher and he told me to mind my business. But sister, the look on his face, it wasn't about prayer, it was fear." "Which night?" "Wednesdays, always Wednesdays, around midnight." Elizabeth felt excitement mixed with dread, a specific recurring pattern. "Thank you, Samuel. Sister, please be careful." "I will be," Elizabeth lied. The midnight stalking. That Wednesday night, Elizabeth prepared. Dark clothes, black jeans, dark hoodie, phone fully charged with plenty of storage, small flashlight, notebook. At 10 p.m., she left her apartment, telling Ngozi she was going to a prayer meeting. Ngozi looked skeptical, but didn't argue. Elizabeth took a taxi to Lekki, to the area where Patricia's mansion was located. She positioned herself near the exit. 11 p.m. came and went. Elizabeth's legs cramped. A security guard walked past, gave her a suspicious look, but she pretended to be on a phone call and he moved on. 11:30 p.m. Elizabeth's resolve wavered. Maybe this was a waste At 11:47 p.m., the gate opened. A Mercedes emerged. Patricia's Mercedes. Elizabeth's heart raced. She began following on foot, keeping to shadows. The Mercedes didn't go far. It wound through streets and pulled up to a small access road leading toward water. The car stopped. Patricia got out, dressed in a simple black dress, and walked toward the water with purposeful stride. Elizabeth ducked behind a parked car, then followed, keeping low, moving from cover to cover. The area was dark, lit only by distant streetlights. She reached a point where she could see the riverbank clearly. Patricia stood at the water's edge, face turned to the sky. And then she began to chant. The sound made Elizabeth's skin crawl. It wasn't any human language, guttural, ancient, wrong in a way she felt in her bones. Elizabeth pulled out her phone and started recording, hands shaking, and then it happened. Patricia's body began to change. Elizabeth watched, mind struggling to process, as Patricia's skin began to shimmer. Then scales emerged. Actual scales spreading across her arms and torso, catching faint light and reflecting it in impossible colors. Then Patricia's legs began to fuse. The skin between them stretched, connected, forming a membrane that grew thicker. Bones shifted audibly, cracks and pops echoing in the night. Joints reformed, her legs merged into a single appendage. A tail. Patricia fell forward onto her hands, which were still human but now covered in scales. Her face began to change, jaw extending, eyes darkening until they glowed faintly. Elizabeth wanted to scream, but clamped her hand over her mouth. This couldn't be real. Humans didn't turn into serpents. This violated every law of biology, physics, reality itself. But she was watching it happen, recording every impossible second. The transformation completed. Patricia, this creature, slithered into the water with terrifying grace, moving like she'd been born to it. She disappeared beneath the surface, leaving barely a ripple. Elizabeth stood frozen, worldview shattered. She had expected fraud, suspicious meetings. She had not expected this. She had not expected literal transformation into a monster. She stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, staring at the water. Finally, hands still shaking, she stopped recording and checked the file. It was there, grainy in darkness, but unmistakable. The transformation was captured. Elizabeth had her smoking gun, proof that Patricia was not just fraud, but something inhuman, something evil. But as she turned to leave, she heard a sound behind her, a hiss. Elizabeth spun around. In the water, glowing eyes watched her. Patricia had sensed her presence. Elizabeth ran. She ran harder than she'd ever run in her life, lungs burning, legs screaming. Behind her, she heard a splash, something large emerging. She reached the main road, flagged down a taxi with desperate urgency, threw herself into the back seat. Drive, just drive. As the taxi pulled away, Elizabeth looked back through the rear window. In the darkness near the access road, she could swear she saw something watching, something with scales and glowing eyes and malevolent intelligence. She had her evidence. But now Patricia knew someone was investigating her. The war was about to begin. The taxi dropped Elizabeth at her building. She ran up the stairs, phone clutched to her chest. Hands still shaking, mind reeling. Ngozi was awake, watching TV. She took one look at Elizabeth's face and jumped up. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Elizabeth managed. Much worse. She pulled out her phone. Watch this. For 5 minutes, Ngozi watched in silence. Elizabeth saw her cousin's face progress through confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally numb shock. When the video ended, Ngozi looked up with eyes too wide, too frightened. That's not real, she whispered. That can't be real. It's real, Elizabeth said flatly. I watched it happen. I was there. But humans can't. That's not biologically possible. I know what I saw, and now you've seen it too. Patricia is not human, or she's partially human, but she's not what she appears to be. Ngozi stood and began pacing. Could it be some kind of genetic condition? Experimental technology? Special effects? Ngozi, this wasn't special effects. I watched her bones move. I watched her legs fuse into a tail, then she slithered into the water. So what is she? I think she's part of something bigger, Elizabeth said, pulling out research notes. Remember stories about marine spirits, underwater kingdoms, pastors who sell their souls for power. I thought it was mythology. But what if it's real? What if Patricia made some kind of bargain with whatever lives in the water? They sat in silence, processing the implications. What are you going to do with that video? Ngozi finally asked. Release it, Elizabeth said with more confidence than she felt. Send it to news organizations, post it online. Make sure everyone sees what she really is. They won't believe it, Ngozi warned. They'll say it's fake, digitally manipulated. Maybe, but I have to try. People need to know what they're worshipping. And what do you think she'll do when she finds out you have this? Elizabeth had been trying not to think about that, because the answer was obvious and terrifying. I don't know, she lied. But I can't let fear stop me. Too many people are being hurt. Ngozi looked at her with a mixture of pride and fear. You're very brave, or very foolish. I'm not sure which. Maybe both. They stayed up the rest of the night, backing up the video to multiple cloud accounts, emailing copies to trusted friends with instructions to release it if anything happened to Elizabeth, preparing a comprehensive document laying out everything she'd discovered. By sunrise, Elizabeth had a plan. She would wait until Sunday, when attendance was highest, when Patricia's profile was most public, and release everything. The video, the testimonies, the financial evidence. She would post it on social media, send it to journalists, make it impossible to ignore. But first, she had to survive until Sunday. Meanwhile, Patricia emerged from the water just before dawn, her body reverting to human form as she dragged herself onto the muddy bank. She was exhausted, but this time there was something else. Anger. Someone had watched her transformation. Someone had been there in the darkness, witnessing what should have been private. She had sensed the presence, distinctly human, filled with fear and determination, but by the time she surfaced to investigate, whoever it was had fled. Patricia made her way back to her mansion, mind racing. Who had seen? How much? And what would they do with that knowledge? She showered, scrubbing away river water and the lingering sensation of her serpent form. Then she sat at her dressing table and made a phone call. "Brother Jude," she said when he answered, "I need you to find out if anyone has been following me. Check security contacts. Review cameras in the area. Someone was watching me tonight and I need to know who." "Yes, Mama. I'll start immediately." "And Jude, when you find out who it is, don't approach them yet. Just monitor them. I want to know what they do, who they talk to, what they're planning." "Yes, Mama." Patricia ended the call and looked at herself in the mirror. Her human face stared back, but she could see the serpent underneath, lurking just beneath the skin. Someone had seen her true form. Someone knew her secret, and that someone had to be dealt with before they could spread the truth. Patricia smiled at her reflection, but it was the smile of a predator, not a prophet. Let them try to expose her. She had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, building loyalty so strong that no evidence could break it. The question wasn't whether someone would try to expose her. The question was, would they survive the attempt? The confrontation. Sunday morning came too quickly. Elizabeth woke after 3 hours of sleep, body exhausted but mind racing with adrenaline and fear. Today was the day. Today she would expose Patricia. But first, she would attend one more service. Call it closure. Elizabeth wanted to see Patricia in person one last time before she destroyed her. She dressed carefully and made her way to Holy Ground Ministries. The compound was packed, cars filling every space, people streaming toward the hall with excited anticipation. Elizabeth found a seat near the back and prepared herself. The service began with usual fanfare, loud music, enthusiastic worship, building energy. Elizabeth watched it all with new eyes, seeing the manipulation in every orchestrated moment. And then Patricia appeared. She looked the same, imposing, confident, radiating power. But Elizabeth could see something different now. She could see the monster underneath, could see scales hiding just beneath human skin, could see the serpent coiled around Patricia's spine. The sermon was eloquent. Patricia spoke about loyalty, about faith, about the dangers of doubting God's anointed. Elizabeth felt a chill. Was Patricia sending her a message? Did she know? As the sermon concluded and offering was collected, Patricia suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes scanned the congregation with intensity that made people shift uncomfortably. And then her gaze landed on Elizabeth. "There's someone here," Patricia's voice rang through speakers. "Someone who has been harboring doubt in their heart. Someone who has been working against this ministry. someone who thinks they can expose God's anointed and go unpunished. Elizabeth felt her blood turn to ice. Around her, people began looking at each other, whispering. "Stand up," Patricia commanded. "Let everyone see you." Elizabeth remained seated, heart hammering. "I said stand up." Patricia's voice exploded with supernatural force. Against her will, Elizabeth found herself standing. Her legs obeyed before her brain could stop them. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned to her. "Come forward." Again her body moved before her mind could resist. She walked down the aisle while the congregation watched in tense silence. When she reached the altar, Patricia descended to stand before her. Up close, Patricia's presence felt cold, unnatural. "What's your name?" "Elizabeth Okonkwo." "Elizabeth," Patricia circled her slowly, "the Lord has shown me you've been investigating this ministry, taking notes, recording conversations, building a case against me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You think you've found evidence of fraud? Tell me, Elizabeth, why do you doubt?" "Because I've seen—" "You've seen nothing," Patricia's voice exploded. "You don't understand the spiritual realm. You don't understand true power." Patricia placed a hand on Elizabeth's forehead. Elizabeth felt invasive coldness, like ice water in her brain. "I can see inside you," Patricia whispered, voice somehow carrying throughout the hall. "I can see your secrets. You lost your virginity at 17 to a boy named Emeka. You cheated on a university exam. You had an abortion at 22. Elizabeth felt tears streaming as her private shames were exposed before thousands. "This is what happens when you come against God's anointed," Patricia announced. "Your secrets are exposed. Let this be a lesson." But something in Elizabeth broke in that moment. Humiliation became fury. "You want to talk about secrets?" Elizabeth heard herself say, voice stronger than expected. "Then let's talk about yours." The congregation fell silent. "On Wednesday night," Elizabeth continued, pulling out her phone with shaking hands, "I followed you. I watched you, and I recorded what you really are." She pulled up the video and held the phone high. The nearest people leaned in to look. The video played. Patricia standing by water, chanting, skin shimmering, scales emerging, legs fusing into a serpent tail. People gasped. Some screamed. Others watched in horror. "That's fake," someone shouted. "It's edited," another voice. But others were silent, watching with dawning horror. Patricia's face went blank. Not angry, just blank, like a mask fallen away. "Give me that phone," she said quietly. "No," Elizabeth said, backing away. "Everyone needs to see this. Everyone needs to know what you are." "Give me that phone." Patricia's voice shattered speakers. Light bulbs burst overhead, raining glass. The ground seemed to vibrate. People screamed and scrambled away from the altar. And Patricia began to change. Right there, in front of 5,000 people, in broad daylight, Patricia's human disguise began to slip. Her eyes darkened, white swallowed by blackness. Her skin took on that shimmering quality, scales beginning to push through. Her movements became too fluid, too serpentine. "You want to see what I am?" Multiple voices spoke through Patricia. "Then look." She was stuck between forms, face distorted, body half-scaled, eyes glowing. A nightmare made flesh. The congregation erupted in chaos. People fled for exits, stampeding over each other. Others fell to their knees praying. The worship team abandoned their instruments. Elizabeth stood frozen, phone still recording. This was it, complete undeniable exposure of Patricia's true nature. But Patricia wasn't finished. She raised one scaled hand, pointing at Elizabeth. "You've ruined everything, years of work, destroyed by one girl with a camera." "You ruined yourself," Elizabeth said. "You made the choice to become this. You sold your soul for power. Now everyone can see what it cost you. And now you'll pay." Patricia lunged forward, hands half human, half clawed, reaching for Elizabeth's throat. But before she could make contact, something remarkable happened. The remaining congregation members, those who hadn't fled, who had stayed despite their fear, began to sing. It started with one voice, trembling but clear. "What a mighty God we serve." Then another joined, and another. Soon dozens of voices were raised in worship, not to Patricia, but to God, the real God. The sound seemed to pain Patricia. She recoiled, transformation reversing slightly, serpent features retreating. "Stop!" Patricia screamed, covering her ears. "Stop singing!" But they sang louder. The worship grew, filling the hall with something Patricia's darkness couldn't withstand. Elizabeth understood then. Patricia's power had always depended on deception, on people believing she was holy. Once that illusion shattered, once people saw her for what she was, her power diminished. True worship, directed at the real God, was like sunlight to a vampire. It exposed her, weakened her, pushed back the darkness she embodied. Patricia fell to her knees, body convulsing as transformation reversed completely. She returned to fully human form, but looked diminished now, smaller, less imposing. The supernatural aura was gone, leaving just a woman, middle-aged, frightened, trapped by her choices. "It's over," Elizabeth said softly, still recording. "Everyone knows now." Patricia looked up with eyes that were human again, but filled with pure hatred. "This isn't over," she whispered, "not even close." Then she stood and, with whatever dignity remained, walked out of her own church. Aftermath. The video went viral within hours. Dozens of people had recorded Patricia's partial transformation from different angles. By evening, videos were everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp. Millions of views. The sheer number of videos from different angles made it impossible to dismiss as fake. By Monday, Patricia's compound was surrounded by journalists, police, and angry ex-members. National news picked it up. International media followed. Patricia had vanished. Mansion empty, staff scattered, inner circle arrested or in hiding. Elizabeth gave interviews to every journalist who asked. She provided her documentation, testimonies, financial records, evidence of staged miracles. She became the face of religious skepticism, the woman who'd exposed one of Nigeria's most powerful spiritual leaders. But the victory felt hollow. She met families who'd given everything to Holy Ground Ministries, savings, homes, businesses, now left with nothing. She heard about people who'd died refusing medical treatment, believing Patricia's miracle oil would heal them. Children who'd suffered because parents prioritized offerings over food. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth stood in the empty Holy Ground Ministries hall with Ngozi. She recorded a final message. "My name is Elizabeth Okonkwo. 2 weeks ago I exposed Prophetess Patricia as something transformed through occult rituals into something not fully human. Many have asked what lessons we should learn. Here's what I want to say. First, this doesn't mean all spiritual leaders are fake. It means we need to be discerning. Use your minds as well as your hearts. Ask questions. Demand accountability. Second, just because someone does miraculous things doesn't mean they're from God. Patricia had real power, dark power from marine spirits. But supernatural doesn't equal holy. Even Satan can perform signs and wonders. Third, be careful what you sacrifice for faith. If a leader demands all your money, all your time, all your critical thinking, that's exploitation, not faith. Real servants of God don't impoverish those they serve. Finally, to those who attended Holy Ground Ministries, who believed in Patricia, who gave everything to what turned out to be a lie, I'm sorry you were deceived, but please don't let this destroy your ability to believe in good. There are real servants of God out there, humble people who work without seeking fame or fortune, who genuinely care. Don't let Patricia's evil blind you to authentic goodness. She posted it, knowing it would be her last major statement on the Patricia scandal. She had exposed the truth. She had provided evidence. Now it was time to let others heal. 3 months later, Elizabeth received a letter. Handwritten, delivered by courier, expensive paper. Inside, in elegant script, "Dear Elizabeth, congratulations on your victory. You've destroyed my ministry, my reputation, my life in the human world. I hope it was worth it. But let me tell you what you haven't destroyed. The marine kingdom, the network of pastors and prophets who serve the ancient powers. The system that turns desperate believers into sources of power and wealth. I was just one node in a vast network. Yes, I'm gone, But there are dozens more like me. You exposed me, but you haven't touched them. They're still out there, still manipulating, still feeding on human devotion. You want to know where I am now? I'm back where I belong, in the depths, where humans can't follow. I've given up my human form permanently. It's a relief, honestly. No more pretending. But here's what I want you to know, Elizabeth. You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over. The Marine Kingdom has been operating for thousands of years. We're patient. We're strategic. And we're not going away. Watch the churches. Watch ministries that grow too fast, promise too much, demand total devotion. We're there. Always have been. Always will be. You've made an enemy, Elizabeth. Be careful walking near water. Patricia, P.S. Your brother's illness. The one that brought you to my church. That was us too. We gave him the sickness specifically to bring you into my orbit. We saw something in you, potential tool for our purposes. Obviously, that didn't work out, but just know that we've had our eyes on you longer than you think. And we're still watching. Elizabeth read it 3 times, hands shaking, the revelation that her brother's illness had been deliberately caused, that she'd been targeted from the beginning, chilled her to the bone. She showed Ngozi, who read with growing horror. She's just trying to scare you, Ngozi said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Elizabeth replied. Or maybe she's telling the truth. Maybe there really are more like her. Maybe I've just scratched the surface. So what will you do? Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to her laptop and opened a new document. I'm going to keep investigating. I'm going to find the others, and I'm going to expose them too, one by one, until the whole network is brought into the light. That could take years. Then I'll take years, Elizabeth said firmly. If there are others like her, they need to be stopped. She began typing, documenting everything about the Marine Kingdom, the network of occult pastors, the signs to watch for. She compiled a list of churches to investigate, patterns to look for, questions to ask. The war wasn't over, it was just beginning. And Elizabeth was ready. 6 months after Patricia's exposure, Holy Ground Ministries was demolished. The land was sold, and money recovered from Patricia's accounts was distributed to verified victims. Several of Patricia's inner circle were prosecuted. Felix got 3 years for fraud. Agatha fled the country. Brother Jude was arrested for assault. The underwater kingdom, of course, could not be prosecuted. It existed beyond human law, in depths authorities couldn't reach. But something interesting happened. Attendance dropped at several megachurches across Lagos. People who'd blindly trusted religious leaders now asked questions, demanded transparency, refused to give unless they understood where money was going. It was a small change, a subtle shift, but significant. Patricia had intended to bind people tighter to spiritual manipulation. Instead, her exposure awakened discernment in those who witnessed her fall. And in churches across the city, true servants of God, those who'd always served with humility and integrity, found their congregations growing, not with thousands drawn by spectacle, but with dozens drawn by genuine compassion and authentic faith. Elizabeth never found definitive proof of the larger network Patricia mentioned. She investigated several suspicious churches, but found only ordinary fraud, still criminal, still worthy of exposure. But nothing as dramatic as Patricia's literal transformation. Maybe Patricia had been lying, a final attempt to spread fear. Or maybe the other Marine Kingdom servants went deeper into hiding, becoming more careful, more subtle. Elizabeth didn't know, but she kept watching, kept investigating, kept asking questions, because in a country where faith was currency and religious leaders wielded enormous power, someone needed to ensure that power wasn't abused. Someone needed to shine light into darkness. And Elizabeth had proven herself capable of doing exactly that. Not everyone who performs signs and wonders is from God. Not every church that fills stadiums is blessed. Not every prophet who speaks with confidence is speaking truth. True servants of God can be recognized by their humility, their integrity, their consistency between public persona and private behavior. They don't demand your last naira. They don't manipulate your fears. They don't claim to be the only path to blessing. Be wise, Be discerning, test the spirits, never be afraid to ask questions, because anyone who punishes questions is hiding something. If a religious leader lives in luxury while their congregation struggles, something is wrong. If miracles only happen during services but never in verifiable contexts, something is wrong. If you're told to ignore your doubts and just believe, something is wrong. God gave you a mind. Use it. God gave you discernment. Trust it. Never let anyone convince you that questioning spiritual authority makes you less faithful. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is refuse to be fooled. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear this message. Remember, stay vigilant, stay faithful to truth, and never stop asking questions. Until the next story, may you walk in wisdom and discernment.